What do you mean that's how your dad does it? Stop telling me how your dad does it. I want to do it this way. Hey, how you doing?
Oh, this could be fun.
I don't even know if it sounds good or not. I should probably listen to it.
You remember that show? Are we recording?
Yeah. I don't know where to put stuff. This is great stuff. Mike, what is going on? How are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Another week, another day, another episode going. Episode number 2.
Oh, right.
Man, this is looking good. I'm enjoying these. These are something that I think is really needed to have been talked about. Just like we talked about last week, the stigma of
Yeah.
in-laws, or there was a movie, Monster In-Law.
Yes.
Not that I'm promoting it or anything, but I mean that's the stigma that. Oh my goodness, I'm getting married. I'm gonna have to deal with monster-in-laws.
This is also that I know of, our first listener requested topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Before we get into today's, pick a question.
We got uncommon questions.
This better not be the one that I think it is.
It says, what is the nicest thing your significant other has done to cheer you up?
This is a family-friendly show.
Very family-friendly show.
Nicest thing. Kim lets me go on motorcycle rides.
Ugh.
Like, there's been a couple of times I've been getting like super into it with the kids, and she'll be like, "Just go, take your bike, get out of here."
Right on.
Or not things that happen in the bedroom. Camping, like, hey, go camping,
Yeah.
or hey, let's go do this, or using our rewards from like hotels.com or something to like just go by ourselves. Or you guys can't see it from here, but on the back of my front door is a coupon for kid-free date night.
Nice.
I usually get one for Christmas and one for my birthday or whenever, but those are like, we figured out, no questions, like we're going on date night. So they're stuck to the back of the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Sleep.
Yeah.
She lets me sleep
Hey.
when I can. If I've got so much going on right now. Work, family.
The boss just walked into the room. We got to be on our best behavior.
It's all good. It's okay. We can do this. But things at church going on and stuff like that, all the studies that I'm doing, it's just really, really busy.
Yeah.
And there's times where she just goes, you just need to sleep. And she'll get up in the morning, especially on weekends, and just go do what she needs to do, let me sleep when I can. My body tends to wake up really early anyway, but those are one of the greatest days is when she just lets me sleep. It's amazing.
I like sleep too.
Does a body good.
Anyway, in-laws. We talked about last week. They're not all evil, horrible people.
No.
They mean well. They have experiences we don't have. They raised our spouses. They love our kids just as much as we do. And in most cases, they really do just want to help.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to talk about boundaries. We've talked about boundaries a lot, right? We have a whole season on boundaries and communication. And this will be just a reoccurring theme you'll hear throughout all of our stuff, is that there needs to be boundaries and direction, and listening to listen, listening for support, and listening to fix it. And in this case, we're talking about some practical ways we can try to not necessarily fix, but curve our issues.
Oh, absolutely.
So when you think of boundaries within the marriage, so not boundaries for our in-laws, that's next week's episode. Thoughts on boundaries within the couples specific to in-laws. What do you think?
In my opinion, I believe that there needs to be a boundary of what you can and cannot speak to your in-laws or their parents about. This is our marriage. It should be our choices. If you're upset with me, please talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times, obviously, that if you're having disagreements and you may want to get somebody else's opinion, I think the boundary should always be that you should never badmouth your spouse.
Yes, I'm with you. Don't go to your mom Like, I shouldn't go to my mom or dad and complain about my wife not holding up her end of the deal or whatever.
Right.
Um, because again, we're opening the door for them to meddle and meddle. That's the right word.
Yeah.
Opening the door for them to voice their opinion, and then tension and grumpiness and fights and all of that stuff come from a result of that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the same thing. I assume my wife doesn't vent to her mother about me. It may happen. Now, there's a difference, and I think there's a difference. Like, my in-laws, my parents, and Kim's relationship with my parents and her parents is all very candid. Like, Jeff the other day did this thing and it was super hilarious and awful all the same. That's not venting. Like, we're not talking about that
Right.
stuff. Like, talking about how your husband's a dork is not the same thing as talking about how your husband's not holding up to his end of the deal or whatever.
Right.
Your husband being a lazy bum is not something you need to tell your in-laws. But how he broke his leg trying to do the trick he used to be able to do 15 years ago,
That's hilarious.
that's a little funny. But inside the marriage, there needs to be boundaries. Things like having a game plan for Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Yeah.
So something that I don't like the word, but we'll use it for the sake of conversation is knowing the triggers of our in-laws or the triggers of us with our in-laws, right? Because inevitably you're going to make it to dinner and something's going to happen and your father-in-law is just going to start pounding in on you and eventually there's an explosion. Think of any mother, father-in-law style movie, right?
Yes.
So game plans for going to dinner, like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to stay. In some cases, if it's just like there's a lot of toxicity across the board from all of the in-laws, like we could have a whole season just on how to deal with brother and sister-in-laws, right? That's a whole different thing. Talk about keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with your sisters, brothers, right?
Definitely.
Still not important. Anyway, those are the kind of things, like there needs to be a game plan ahead of time, like almost like making an appearance. Now, if you're traveling across the country and you got to stay in the same house, like we don't have enough time for that kind of show.
Right.
But, things like locally here in the valley, like, okay, we're going to go. And I don't have this problem. Like, I love my in-laws. I physically stay with them on purpose regularly. But other people, like, hey, we're going across town to eat Thanksgiving dinner with my in-laws, and I'm just not looking forward to it. We'll have a plan. Like, hey, we're gonna go 2 hours, right? Or we'll eat dinner, and when dinner's over, we'll stay for another hour and like interact or whatever. But having those expectations ahead of time. But the more important things that I think through with the boundaries within the marriage specific to in-laws is we have left our family to go start the new family. We talked about this a little bit last week.
Yeah.
That needs to be defended. Right? I don't know what that looks like. The hook, stop telling me how your dad did it because we are going to do it this way. I'm not saying that there's a hierarchy. There's a man of the house who wears the pants, because I clearly don't wear the pants in my house. I will be the first one to admit that. But if the way dad did it isn't the way you want to do it, your spouse needs to be okay with that, assuming there's always the caveat or the disclaimer. You don't want to hurt yourself or kill yourself or any of those things. Like, don't be stupid while you're doing it. But the idea that don't compare your husband to your dad in a negative way. Like, if he's doing good things, like, hey, my dad did it like that, that's cool. Not necessarily great, but my dad always painted it this way and you're painting it this way. It doesn't matter. Be on your spouse's side, because you've left your old family to start a new family. Some of the things your family did are going to be great, some of them aren't going to be. And again, our in-laws have life experiences, but we need to establish the boundaries, right?
Definitely.
And in notes, have you defended your spouse, right? And basically it's saying, have you prioritized, in our case, our wives over our parents? And ladies, if you're watching, have you put your husband and children above your parents. Because that's difficult, right? I mean, they raised us.
Very.
They're who. I mean, that's not saying we don't want to just kick them out and say they can't be part of our lives. That's not what I'm saying. But when it comes to family decisions, how to raise your kids, what school they're going to go to, are you going to homeschool them? Are you going to buy this car? Are you going to buy that car? Soliciting advice is okay, but ultimately the decision is between the couple.
Definitely.
Yeah. Don't go venting about your spouse. My favorite one, and this is the one I hear the most of, like when we're in the socials. Don't compare your spouse and everything they do to your parents.
Yeah, you should never do that.
Yeah, no, never, ever. Yeah.
I look at it. I've sat there and again, for those that are just tuning in, that are just starting to watch, I've been married going on 29 years this year.
You're old.
I'm old. It's showing. I mean,
Hey,
the
I'm not
kids,
far behind
grandkids. But I have that ability, the luxury, so to speak, to be able to look back at my marriage in the early times and hopefully offer um, some hidden gems to those that are watching that we can take from our experiences and give examples. For me, I can look back and say, I remember being at my mom's house,
you.
and my mom worked hard her entire life, catered to the family, my father, my brother, and I, and we didn't have to do a lot. That's how she was raised. That's how I was brought up. And when I started into marriage, I expected that's how it was supposed to be. And then when my wife wasn't doing what my mom did for my father, I it was I would sit there at times and we'd be at my mom's house and my mom would be like, "You need to do this for your husband." And I would sit back and kind of have a grin going, "Yeah, you should be doing this for your husband." Absolutely wrong thing to do, wrong thing to say to your wife. But as time went on, I could tell how much it hurt my wife. And it took years, to be honest. And there's times where, even now, with my mom, she may not agree with my wife. I can sit there and she'll expect me to agree with her. And I'm going to go, "Mom, that's my wife. I will choose her." And no matter what we're talking about, the discussion could be finances, children, what to eat for dinner,
Oh yeah.
things like that. Even the
Hold on,
smallest
hold
things.
on. They never know what to eat for dinner. Why,
It's a surprise, and
guys? You
that's
want to
what
know the trick? When Mike's done, I'll tell you the trick to know how to
it's
tell
a
your
great
wife.
trick. He
It's
told me,
fantastic.
but to sit there and have my mom expect me just to immediately back her over my wife for anything, and to sit there and watch my wife light up when I stand behind her and say, "This is my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I choose my wife." Like you said, we started a family. We started our own family. And now to have my wife know that I love her that much, that I'm choosing her,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not doing it for that reason, but I'm doing it because I love my wife. I'm not doing it to go, "Ha ha, mom." But that's what we need to do. We need to put our wives not up on a pedestal, but in front of our parents.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned over, some, there's a lot that I've learned, but that's one of the things that I would throw out there.
Yeah. We need to be okay with saying no to our parents,
Yes,
or even
absolutely.
and it probably, if this is the relationship you have with your in-laws, it won't help you any. But saying no to your in-laws, and I can do that. Like, um, the biggest boundary that I see broken across the board is kid schedules.
Yeah,
Oh, like horribly. Um, we need to be able to say no. Like, and that needs to, and I've had this conversation with my parents. They've had it with me. Like, hey, when you ask us, because like we talked about last week, my parents have never told me this is how I need to do this, like ever. I have asked, or they've made suggestions, and it's always been like we have the same conversation every time. Hey, you don't have to do this, but this helped us.
yeah.
And a lot of times it works, but sometimes they're like, I don't think that's us right now. And I'm okay with that. My parents are okay with that. I think we have a great relationship. I assume my wife has that relationship with her parents, but I have that relationship now with my in-laws that if I don't think that's the best direction, it's not, and they're okay with that. But it took a lot of like manning up for myself to be able to say no the first time. And
Right.
it doesn't always go over well. Like there have been times where it's been just awful and it doesn't help ease the tension at all. Um but it's priority, right?
Definitely.
Prioritizing our own family. But the boundaries and the game plan are like let's talk about them ahead of time. Kid schedules, for example. Kids do great on schedules. We could have a whole episode about that. Kids do great on schedules. Like for us, we pretty well stick to the same schedule every day, even in the summertime. The kids get up, they brush their teeth, make their bed, get dressed, or get ready for school for the day. Then they go to school. Whatever happens while they're at school is the same schedule, right?
Right.
You look at my kids do math, English, science, specials, and lunch and all that stuff in the same order every day. And then they come home. But even as little kids, like, our kids, I'm going to get the times wrong, but they'd come in or they'd get up and then they'd have a short nap from like 9 to 10. And then they'd have lunch and they'd have their afternoon nap from noon to 3 or 1 to 4. And that was it. Like, that's not negotiable. And all the time, my in-laws, but I have, my in-laws were never like this. So super awesome. I have been blessed. And I'm sorry if you don't have in-laws like this. But they always want to, well, we're just going to go do this, or we're going to give them a snack, or whatever. No, if these are the schedule and these are the boundaries that you and your wife have set for your kids, that we don't have snack this close to dinner, or we don't do this close to nap time, or nap time is, because let's be real. And yes, it's grandma's job to spoil her grandkids. That's fine, within reason.
Right.
And in-laws, like, yes, one of the greatest joys they will ever have is having grandkids. And hopefully you're in a spot where you can let them have a relationship with your kids. But there still needs to be boundaries. Because at the end of the day, if the kid misses the nap, or the nap's too short, or there's too much junk food involved, the mom and dad have to deal with that at the end of the day. And that, it's unfair, but it's avoidable and unfair.
Yes.
Like, life is not fair. That's a reality. If you're under 30, get over it. But can we avoid some of the unfairness? And so that's when we talk about boundaries in the marriage. We need to defend our spouses. We have chosen. We can go biblical, like we left. We'll leave our mother and father and become one with another woman, right? So that's the relationship. Our spouses are our life partners. Our parents are not, and that's really hard to, especially for, I want to say single children, only childs, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
Only
I
child.
don't have kids who are only children. Their parents are who they grew up with. Like, that's it. Like, so my mom always did it this way. My mom always did it. Stop. Your mom may have always done it that way, but you can choose to do it differently. And that's not to say all those things are bad. Like, my wife's apple pie recipe has come from generations of her family. It's wonderful. Those kind of things are okay. But if there's something that your mom always did, or dad always did, doesn't mean your husband has to do it, because it might not be right for your family dynamic.
Yeah.
The point is to talk to each other about it. Communication. Go back and watch any part of season 1. Talk about it, have a plan, and understand that both wives and husbands, your initial immediate family, you, your spouse, and your children, come first.
Yes.
We date night, date day. I guess it's date day. My kids have a half day on Mondays. Every Monday I take one of my kids out. That's not negotiable. Grandma and grandpa, aunt, uncle, nobody is taking that kid on date day. That's my day to take my kid out. That is not negotiable. Those kind of things. Sunday mornings from 7 to noon are not negotiable. My family, everybody has some place to be between 7 and noon.
Yeah.
But we are going to church. That's not negotiable. And that needs to be, and that'll be all next week's episode, is these boundaries then need to be explained to the in-laws. That These are the rules. You want to be a part of our life? These are the rules. You don't want to be a part of our life? Okay.
Definitely.
Now, some other things to think about to go with this, and this one is I think it's interesting because you're not gonna like every person you encounter.
Of course
Like
not.
it I think the statistic back when I first heard it was 3% of the people you ever meet in your life you're just not gonna like. I'm an Uber driver. I meet 20 or 30 new people every day.
Oh, oh.
3% of them I don't like. So add that to all of the people we meet, right? So all of you that have 1,000 Facebook followers, 300 of them you don't even like anyway. So I guess that's 30%. 30 of them you won't like anyway. I did not graduate as a math major. I'm sorry. Anyway, if that's not possible, I want your thought on this. If you can't get to the point to where your in-laws, your relationship is to the point where you can manage it, it is okay, in my opinion, and I want your thought on this. It is okay to make plans with your parents without your spouse.
Yeah.
With the rules that you're not going to vent or be grumpy about your spouse in general, and specifically about them not being there.
I agree.
That's a lot of times the guy's like, I don't care if my wife hangs out with her mom. I just don't want to. That's fine. Your wife needs to not be grumpy that you're not there if that's agreed upon. Like, if you committed to going and then change your mind,
That's a total
quit being a punk.
Yeah.
But but I'm not talking about like ladies' tea day. You're clearly not going to women's tea. Like it's yeah.
Right.
But if they're just going to hang out, and there have been times like I love my in-laws, but there have been times like I don't have it today. Like it's not them, it's me. I really just don't have the mental capacity to do this. That needs to be okay. Because my mother-in-law lives 5 miles from here. They're together a lot, and it's wonderful. Like again, I'm not knocking anything on them. But there's some days I'm done peopling.
That makes sense.
I see 20 or 30 new people every day. I'm done.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of guys that feel, and I read this in groups and stuff, that feel that they have to participate in every single thing.
Not at all. Not at all.
And we could have that. Well, that's a whole show we could do too about limiting your activities with your family. Anyway, you agree with me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, my take on that is as a husband, me, um, I do need to go over there.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, there's going to be times where there were times when I just didn't want to. And you have to be on the same page with your wife or your spouse if it's vice versa. That it's not that you don't want to be with them. You understand
Yeah.
that. It's not that you don't want to be with your spouse. You just at that moment you don't want to be around or deal with your in-laws. Dealing with them could put that wedge that we talked about last week. There's a wedge that could be placed there. And the animosity could build if you were able to just sit there and say, "Hey, hon," for me talking to my wife, "Hon, I'm just not going to go." Like you said, I'm just not into it. And for my wife to go, "Okay," and go on, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I think it was last week. I said I would drag my feet for hours.
Yeah.
Trying not to go. But then obviously that made it worse. She wants to go visit with her parents. I didn't. So I took my time and dragged my feet. Okay, well, I'm going to do this or that, the other thing. If I would have just said, "Hey, hon, go ahead and go. I'm not really into it," there would have been a lot less friction between us and my in-laws, because now I'm late because Mike was going to go change his mind, or Mike just didn't want to go and dragged it out. So the honesty with your parents or with your spouse about their parents, just be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to like everything that they do. They're definitely not going to like everything that you do. So there has to be an understanding with your spouse.
Yes.
As long as there's that understanding and you guys can get along with that, in my opinion, I believe that's how a healthy relationship will work between the marriage itself as well as in-laws on both sides of the family.
Absolutely. It's the communication. Like,
Yes.
let's tack this on to like last season stuff. There needs to be boundaries, both good and bad, both good and whatever. We need to be allowed not to go,
Right.
but at the same time, we need to participate in the extended life of the family, especially if it's not an everyday thing or an every week thing. Like, if your extended family doesn't live where you live, you'd probably need to commit to going and letting your wife see her parents or your kids see grandma and grandpa, that kind of stuff. The thing is, though, like, tell your spouse you need something to talk. Like, hey, we need to talk. Give them a little bit of context. Like, hey, can we talk about your mom and dad? I would like to take a new approach to dealing with in-laws.
Yeah.
Because that's difficult, and that's the first step. And then whatever the boundaries are, both sides stick to them. Both couple, like the husband and wife, stick to them. Because a lot of times, hey, we agreed on it now, but in practice, we're not agreeing on it.
Right.
And it needs to be okay to go and talk about that and call them out at home in private later if they didn't, hey, we talked about this. This is what we're going to do. Right?
Yeah.
Boundaries within the marriage need to be established. You need to stick up for your spouse and your kids. Your family comes first. Your schedule comes first. And then we'll talk about next week if they want to participate in that. Here's the rules and expectations.
Yeah.
And cliffhanger, if we can call it that, is you don't have to let anybody into the lives of your kids unless you want them to be there.
That's true.
That includes family.
Very true.
Especially if they're toxic and they're horrible. Again, I think at the heart of it, most people mean well. You just have to talk to them about it, and we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah.
So real quick, the trick before we give you our disclaimer. We got a minute and a half. Our wives, we love them dearly. They let us see things. They never know where they want to eat. So you pack everybody up into the car, and after you left the driveway, with the most sincere look you possibly can, look at your wife and say, "Hey, guess where I'm taking you for dinner?" The first answer out of their mouth is where you go.
That's it.
That's the answer. Ladies, you're going to laugh the first time your husband does that if you've heard this. Anyway, it does not always work because that's my wife's least favorite game, and so she just won't answer me. But I've narrowed it down to 3. Cane's, Olive Garden, or Red Robin. 4. Uncle Sam's. If you're in the Valley, 83rd and Union Hills.
Never been there.
Closest thing to a real Philly cheesesteak I've had within driving distance. Like, there are some East Valley that are amazing.
Nice.
Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. We are not mental health professionals. If you need help of any kind, please seek it out. There are plenty of professionals that have skills and education and are willing to help you get better at life. We are just 2 guys having fun trying to help guys be better at marriage. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. We would love it if we could grow our community. My wife still likes me, mywifestilllikesme.com, and we will see you next week. Peace.